Hello, dear student. This is Amir Khan, your social studies teacher. We are studying about the major climatic regions of the world. So this would be our my last lecture according to the major climatic. Last class, as we have studied about monsoon climate, Mediterranean climate, tundra, and then we study now equatorial. Today we'll study about equatorial climate and temperate grassland. So where you will learn about uh, what is equatorial climate or temperate grassland. Okay, then we will study about what kind of animal and plants are found in the equatorial climate and temperate grassland regions of these climate zones. So first of all, if we come to that in equatorial, as we well known about, we have studied in the monsoon, but it is different from that, where that equatorial climates are found on the equator zone, and mostly the rainforest, the equatorial forests are found on these region. You can look over here, they are mostly on the equatorial zone. So it starts from 0 to 30 degree on the equator zone. So actually that are on equator regions are located on the band around the equator and cover 6% of the earth's surface. So these are often of lowland area and have a climatic that hot and wet climates are found on this equator region. So if we look on that in the rainforest, as we well know about, mostly in the equatorial forest region, we find malaria diseases, where these kinds of diseases we find over there because of that wet. So these are, you can look over here, these kinds of rainforests we find on that equator region. So they are mostly green areas and different kinds of plants we find over here. Like you can look over here, some of the canopies are very tall, canopy that are tall, and some are short as well. So for because of that short region, there are, you can look over here on the down, that overlap over the soil and this, and that again make another land over here. So you can look on the another point, we look over here in the forest, their leaves are very big, and there are around 15 to 30 centimeter of that leaves we find in the equator region. So another one, as we discussed before, mostly rainfalls are happening over here. Then we look over here, there are these kinds of vegetations we find. Some are big, some are small as well. So because of that, these are, and you well known about that, mostly these equatorial region we find the Amazon forest, which is the world largest forest. So it is around all it's around 5.2 million square kilometer. If we estimate that with our subcontinent around of the subcontinent, it cover subcontinent, and till there would be 1.2 million, still there would be chance of that, because much more than subcontinent, that forest is that much big, which gave us 20% or more than 20% of oxygen for the world. Only Amazon forest, which is found on the equator region. So these are on the importance of that Amazon forest. Then we also call that savanna region as well, because we find a number of animals and plants were here. You can look over here, these animals are found on that equator region. You can look, the names are also mentioned over there, and you have to look these carefully, and you should know the names, some of the names, because I will give this homework, this in your homework as well. Then we find coconut are also found in the equator region. Then we find mostly agriculture activities are happening in the equator region. Like we look over here, that we have discussed on the monsoon as well. Like we find bananas and wheat, tea, coffee, rubber, and coca, sugarcane, and mangoes. These kinds of another types of tropical fruits we find on these region. So, what are the characteristic of the equator climate? Constant high temperature. It's mostly temperatures are till to 28 to 30%. So these are the average of the temperature. You can look over here, the rainforest, the precipitation, mostly it is above 100 or 200 above, mostly we find over here. Lowest annual temperature rain of any climate. Even evenly distributed heavy precipitation we find. Rain we find. Lot of cloud cover in high humidities we mostly find on these region. Yeah, so these kinds of climates we find on subcontinent as well, in our regions as well, but it is only in the southern part of Pakistan. So then we find another topic is on temperate grassland. In temperate grassland we find these are mostly from 30 to 60 degree. So these regions you find over here, that are the regions on the southern part and the northern part as well. So these are mostly find over on these region. Look closely, and these are mostly in USA, southern part of Argentina or Chile. Then we find over here South African. Then we find on the eastern side of Australia, and then we find the temperate grassland mostly in Mongolia, in China, northern part, and some part of Eastern Europe. We find over here that Eurasian steppe, like over here, these are we find of these climate. So these are the plants which we find on these regions, and flowers we find over here. Then we look over here that these grasslands and animals are also find over here. These kinds of animals we find on temperate grassland, and these are the animals we find on that temperate grassland region. So these would be of today's topic. And then your homework would be your homework is to be why are equatorial forests so important for the world. So this we have already discussed, how what is the importance. Then list 5 animals, name of temperate grassland and equator, both animal, 5 animal, list down. If you want more, you can, then you can also do more. Then we find over here list 5 plants name and of temperate grassland and equatorial climate. So both you have to do list down at least 5 name. If you want to more, you can write more. Thank you so much for listening me.